Hey everybody, welcome to the Techstrong Gang. I'm Mike Bizarre, and we got a little bit of everything today. We got espionage, Cyber Monday, and some cloud native app dev stuff. So we'll be back in a minute. All right, welcome back. And the A block, well, it's pretty serious stuff. There's all kinds of reports coming out of Washington about the extent to which the Chinese may have compromised our telecom networks. Of course, this has been going on for months now, at least. Well, it's probably been going on for years, but we've been aware of it for months, and yet we don't seem to be making a lot of progress. And then suddenly somebody appears to have made some closed door testimony to senators in Congress, and everybody's flipping out. John, what is up with this whole issue between us and China and espionage? It seems like we've known about this since, I don't know, I remember John Chambers screaming about this stuff and Yahweh equipment, and we had money set aside to get rid of all this equipment, and yet it's still in there. So what's our problem?
Yeah, it's been going on. It's been going on for years. There's this form of warfare, digital warfare, asymmetrical warfare that's been going on between the U.S. and China, and to a lesser extent, Russia and Iran. And this latest example, Mike, I have to admit that I got this confused with yet another breach that we can talk about. But this one, in a sense, it involves several large telcos, which evidently this started in the spring, if not earlier, and it's still going on, CISA admitted, which has led to all sorts of angst and a rare joint advisory between the FBI and NSA recommending that people should use strong encryption. Yes, strong encryption to battle this group that calls itself Salt Typhoon. So in recent months, this group has gained access into IT environments of several ISPs. And there, as you mentioned, there was a U.S. government agencies held a classified briefing, I believe it was on Wednesday. And was it the FBI, DNI, FCC, NSC, CISA? They all got together in a closed door briefing to talk about this. One thing I was going to mention, there's a group, not Salt Typhoon, but something called Full Typhoon, which the FBI director, Ray, referred to as the defining threat of our generation. And that included a Chinese-sponsored group that was focused on pre-positioning themselves within the U.S. critical infrastructure to launch cyber attacks in the event of some other major crisis or conflict with the U.S. So as you said, this has been going on for years. I think it's going to escalate given the political climate and the uncertainty around tariffs and AI, et cetera. It's a can of worms, and I don't know if we can put the top back on it.
Mitch, you've been around this space forever, but what do we got to do here? Do we just got to rip out all the gear that we got from China that's in those networks, or is it more complicated than that?
Well, let me just comment on it first. First of all, we've taken our eye so far off the ball on this and not paying attention to it. We've been, goofing around with, the election and insurrections and whatever and all this other baloney. And this is serious stuff. This is a five alarm fire. And I'm not trying to just be hyperbolic about it, but let me be hyperbolic about it. Everything touches our telecommunications networks, and our telecommunications networks touch everything. And this isn't a hack. This isn't like I'm stealing credit card data and social security numbers. This is an infiltration into our networks. It isn't one server that got hacked and then they did something. This is them getting into those networks, not only gaining control of the things we know about, but getting themselves into other systems and servers. So it isn't just computers, it's applications, it's network equipment, because all of these networks now are software defined networks. They're software elements. They're not hardware gear like they used to be. So it is, if you can get in and move laterally, it's not just move laterally one direction, it's 360-degree lateral movement all across these networks. And I think my prediction is we will find this is 100x more extensively infiltrated than what we're reading about in the media. So I'm serious. This is deadly serious stuff. So you want to see airplanes starting to fall out of the sky. You want to see money go missing in financial transactions. You want to see your 401k disappear. You want to see our military, become ineffectual. while we're goofing around with who should be the defense leader or the, CAA, whatever, this is real stuff. They are doing some real serious damage here, and it's a low and slow kind of activity. That's what's hard to detect is when something takes months to do, it's kind of laying in wait, right? And when you see it, it only is such a big thing because it's happened over such a long time before we've discovered it. So we need to get serious about this, or we may the electricity lights may go off.
Yes, that's interesting that you mentioned that, Mitch, because years and years ago, I went to this summit. I was invited on background. It was in Monterey, and there were Defense Department officials there, various people from the Pentagon, et cetera, private enterprise. And they were talking about, this is pre-AI's growth, and they were talking about our water supplies being shut off, electricity, financial systems being neutered, so to speak, all these different scenarios, because a lot of the countries and the groups within these countries that are waging war against us, they can't, I mean, in a conventional warfare, they can't compete with the United States, so they have to find another way. And it goes both ways, by the way. So they were mentioning some of the stuff they had tried in the Middle East back in the early 2000s. And this is it's just escalated. And I think you're completely right. There's a level of this that we have absolutely no idea of. And that's intentional, by the way, in terms of the adversaries. They're just probing and seeing what they can do and biding their time and infiltrating.
Yeah, and it's a lot about compromising, getting in, and then just staying there, having a presence there, so you can do things with compromised systems or networks. So when we see announcements from the FBI and from Apple and Google or whoever about don't text, use an encrypted application, that's a very edge symptom of what's going on. That's not the issue. So think about what they're saying. They're saying don't send text messages because any of those are susceptible to being read by the Chinese or anyone else that's in our net. They are in our networks, and so that they can see all that is what they're saying. So don't use a system that's encrypted. Now, is it end-to-end encrypted? That's the real question. But anyway, my point is using a WhatsApp is a symptom, a solution to a symptom, not a solution to the cause. And that tells you, at least gives you an indicator of how pervasive this is. If we're that concerned about our text messages being read, trust me, it's much more significant than just your text messages. It's everything.
All right. So go ahead.
Sorry, Mike, I was just going to say, putting the onus on the average end user to encryption is your friend is not the right solution either. And this is the who, what, when, where of phone calls with, all of these pieces of information put together. They can determine personal information about people, and the onus having to be on the end user, I think, is a huge mistake. We have heard from Verizon, T-Mobile, Lumen, and AT&T, and all have said, hey, from what we understand, no customer data has been compromised. However, I think given that it's the who, what, when, why of phone calls, all that metadata together can tell stories about people, and we don't know who. Is it everyone? Is it specific individuals? Probably. But it's got to be something that has to be done that the end user doesn't have to worry about, because I think that's a huge problem right there.
I think we should clarify what the carriers are not saying there, which is the metadata seems to have been stolen. And if I have your metadata, I can tell a lot about you. And then two is apparently, adding insult to injury here, they did steal espionage or surveillance data that our agencies have been collecting, and then the Chinese now have access to it as well. Mitch, there's a debate going on in Washington about whether or not the time has come that we need an actual cybersecurity department and a cabinet level person to go drive this conversation, because it seems like, CISA and all these folks and the FBI, they're doing a great job, but it still feels a little disjointed. So do we need to bring all this together?
I'd have to go back and look when I said this, not to say I told you so, but I said the exact same thing probably 9 months, maybe a year ago, of we have to elevate cyber and cybersecurity to the topmost. It's equally as important as aircraft carriers and nuclear devices. I mean, this is literally, ending a society kind of activity. You could if you corrupted the water supply. Electricity is not something that you can depend on anymore. All of our communications can potentially either be interrupted or intercepted and used against you. You have total control over a society, right? And so I think we need to quit goofing around. This is serious business, and it's one of the things that frustrates me about Washington. People are, upset about inflation rates. Trust me, we have those are at low levels compared to what could happen to our society if we really are disrupted by the Chinese or other entities. So it's time to get deadly serious about this and put competent people in leadership roles that can lead us, because there's good things happening in CISA and other parts of the organization, but they're kind of hanging out there doing their thing without a real strategy and somebody leading across all those agencies and conducting it. This is the 2001 9/11 event that we're looking at that could have a massive impact on us. I'm serious. It's to me, I'm scared. It's a very scary thing.
Well, to make it a little more interesting, John, there's a report in the New York Times talking about how the Russians have put a satellite up at the highest levels of space that includes a dummy warhead. And the idea here is that they're testing the theory that they might be able to blow up a satellite that takes out every other satellite that's out there. So are the stakes in this whole thing just getting raised to a level that we're just starting to comprehend?
Yeah, that's interesting. I saw that story that you sent earlier today, and it raises the stakes, and it's and I'm not being flippant here, but this is like James Bond stuff coming to life. And I'm like Mitch, having heard about this, having written about it, and Mitch actually was a source for a book what we did. As part of the book that we did years ago, this was kind of something we looked at on the side as something happening in the future, and it is frustrating, given what's at stake and what our government isn't doing. It's trying to, with AI in a certain sense, it kind of opened their eyes to the possibilities of things that could go wrong. And they actually, to the credit of the government, they have enlisted people who actually understand the technology and use them as advisors. So there is some sort of progress. But I was thinking of the same thing that Mitch was. I'm thinking we're going to have some sort of incident, some sort of digital, they used to call it the digital Pearl Harbor effect, right? Or a 9/11 type of effect. Something like that is inevitably going to happen. It's really weird too, because I think Trump, in a kind of a weird way, mentioned like a Star Wars defense of some sort when he was campaigning. So somebody's chatting into his ear, or at least they're trying to think of it in like a kind of a space defense or a cyber defense issue. I'm just afraid that, just given the uncertainty of who runs what and the change of administration, and where eyes are not on the ball, we're all distracted by things like tariffs and inflation, and this is the really important stuff that we should all be concerned about.
Deck chairs on the deck of the Titanic. Just be careful what we're arranging.
Yeah.
Lisa, I feel like the carriers are still treating this as some sort of PR marketing issue and not a national security issue. So that they need to kind of step up the way that they are talking about this, because, the first thing that they're putting out is a statement about, customer data. This is like a bigger issue than just whether or not, your text or my text went missing.
Right. No, it's a huge issue. And I think from what I gather, there's a lot of information that, as Mitch is saying, we don't know, that the carriers don't know either. I think because breaches are so common these days and everyone is worried about my data being stolen, that's the first response in terms of no customer data was compromised, or several weeks ago, Verizon said we became aware of this. Verizon said, we understand that focus was quite narrow. I don't know that they know that, and it's probably not even true. So they have to manage this from a marketing and a PR perspective very carefully, but they need to be more informed. And I think they're probably struggling to try to get the information from the government and even CISA said they couldn't offer a timetable for remediation. So I think in some cases, the carriers might be flying a little bit blind and are trying to put out messages that will assuage the concerns. But like I said earlier, I think putting the onus on the end user for, encryption is your friend is the wrong thing. But maybe right now it's the only thing. It's the first line of defense, which just seems so odd to me that can't be it.
And we have tensions with China across the board here, right? We're talking about Taiwan and semiconductors, and we are limiting access to equipment to them for building semiconductors. And now they're saying they're going to limit access to the metals that we need to build semiconductors. So, John, is this just part and parcel of, a whole slew of things that are maybe we're sliding into something without realizing just how big it is and what
Yeah. Yeah. I
kind of
was thinking
feel like,
about that.
if you're a historian, it might be the early days of World War One, right?
Right. Yeah. This is this form of escalation, like on multiple fronts, that leads to an aggravation and antagonization and agitation between multiple countries and their whatever their end games are. So in a sense, it does build into it. And it also puts the tech industry in a weird kind of difficult situation, not just with tariffs, but the relationship in general with China. And we're so dependent on China. And when you think of a company like an Apple or a Qualcomm, and it affects the entire ecosystem, the critical infrastructure, the supply chain, uh, what have you, the results. I mean, like 15 to 20% normally of Apple's revenue emanates from China. So this is not just a military or defense related issue; it's an economic issue, and I think we better be careful about our saber rattling with China, because I think we're playing with fire in a way that has longer range, deeper implications.
I think that becomes the ultimate question, right? To what degree are we willing to make certain sacrifices that would be required to disengage from China? I'm not saying we need to go to war per se, but there will be an argument that says we need to have a strategic policy that says we're going to quietly, over the next 4 or 5 years, start moving strategic things outside of China, not be dependent upon them for manufacturing. I mean, you've heard all these issues before, and Mitch, how long might that take?
Well, it's, think about how we've progressed in our thinking about national security with Homeland Security Department. And one of the first steps was coordinating information flow and access between agencies. One of the fundamental problems that we recognize in 9/11 was, it's sort of the and fire and the sheriff department were all on different frequencies of radios, to be real simplistic about it. And so getting people to be able to communicate effectively, share information, both at the time of an event, but, just as importantly, in the background of understanding what's happening. Because it's detected in one area. We all watch shows like, FBI on TV or whatever. They have all those great screens where they can kind of connect all the dots in 4 minutes and find who the bad guy is and where they walked across the city, and then they go arrest them. But to do that is really a complex task. So that information sharing is vital. I think the next part of it, though, is that has to be, to take it to the next level, you have to back it up by a strategy. Think about our national defense strategy from a military standpoint, right? The kind of wars that we're prepared to fight, the defensive posture that we have to take, changing from World War II to Vietnam or guerrilla warfare to cyber defense. And we've worked on pieces of those, but I think the real challenge is, I think the bigger issue is our cyber, both offense and defense capability has to be equal or at above what our physical, tactile military capabilities are. And I'm not saying we aren't doing anything there, not, and by any stretch. It's not an area that I'm directly involved in and have lots of clearances to see in or anything. But that is the world we live in, and that's how you then roll the tanks in after all the power's down and everybody's clamoring for water and food. So it's a totally different strategy.
All right. Well, folks, I think we're going to shift gears here a little bit, but I would just say next time you're crafting that email or sending a text, be aware that wherever you're sending it to, there's a lot of other people looking at it. Hey, we'll be back in a minute.
Modernize your business to fuel innovation and elevate customer experiences. With the Builder Community Hub, AWS and its partner network provide essential tools for transforming applications and infrastructure to fully leverage the cloud. Discover free trials, in-depth demos, and essential resources to empower DevOps engineers and developers to deliver value faster and more reliably. Visit the Builder Community Hub to learn more.
All right, we're back with something that hopefully is a little lighter than the previous block, but looks like Cyber Monday hit another record in terms of the amount of revenue, how much money was spent. John, I know you covered this and continue to look at what's going on with digital e-commerce, but what's your take on this? Because, theoretically, we're all supposed to be involved in some sort of recession, and yet we find money to spend for Christmas.
Yes, maybe we're spending before the recession fully hits us. I don't know, or before inflation even gets worse. I don't know. But anyway, the $13.3 billion was the figure on Monday. I kept having to update it for the story. I got the numbers from Adobe Analytics. So that number is up 7% from last year. And just to put it in perspective, the peak shopping hours were 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern time, when an average of $15.7 million was being spent per minute. I think there were about 73 million people were shopping that day, according to Adobe. Salesforce, actually, to its credit, had another report. Theirs was not quite as high as 13.3, it's about 12.8. So anyway, we're looking at several influences. AI-driven chatbots and assistants has spurred shopping habits of consumers. So the Black Friday traffic, for instance, to retail sites from chatbots was up 1,800% compared to the same time last year. There's also this, of course, the buy now, pay later, or BNPL as they call it, which was up significantly. This was, I think, was 16.6 billion in 2023 and 14.5 in 2022. This year's supposed to be 18.5. In other words, people are going to buy now and pay later through models. One other thing was Amazon, Walmart, and Target were, because of the fewer shopping days between Thanksgiving and Christmas this year, were pushing sales and pushing certain promotional events earlier. So that played into the momentum. And to experiment, I actually did go in to a Best Buy on Monday, and just to actually make a purchase, but also to just experience what was going on. I talked to some of the people there, and it was absolutely insane. And I thought about you, Lisa, when I was doing this story, because I know you're going to have a lot of insight into what's going on. But it was, again, a continuation of AI actually really goosed things on this year's edition.
One of the things that surprised me, John, and I wonder if it surprised you, about the Adobe survey of 5,000 consumers, was that 20% of those consumers were reliant on AI chatbots. And that surprised me because we hear so much negativity on chatbots. I'm one of those people I'm very patient with chatbots because I know we have the opportunity to train the models and help it learn more. But did that surprise you that the number was that high?
It did. Yes. But you know what? I'll admit something. I used the chatbot that day. I was looking for something. I was looking for a charger. I was looking for a secondary charger for my laptop. And I did actually fall into that. And it actually was highly effective, I have to admit. And the experience was much better than I expected. A year ago, I never would have done that. So, yeah, that was, that number was high, but not entirely surprising. Because a lot of the purchases, the most popular purchases, and Adobe looks at those as well, involve things like digital cameras, televisions. Yes. Sony PlayStation 5, for example, a lot of electronic gadgetry. So people want more kind of a specialized idea of based on price range or what's available. And the other thing is, I will not make a purchase unless I know it's actually going to be there. So I buy before I go, which may be a little bit crazy, but there was a lot of that going on. I went to the pickup area for the orders, and that was a zoo.
I bet. Yeah, it's interesting that you talked about, 13.3 billion from with the help of AI, up 7% over last year. But another thing that struck me is not just fewer shopping days between Thanksgiving and Christmas in 2024, but the BNPL that number is forecasted, John, you said, to be over 18 billion. People want what they want, and if they can do the modern layaway version of buy now, pay later, they will, and they have, and they've demonstrated that. So I think it just goes to show the consumer demand is there regardless of the state of the economy. People want what they want. They want to be able to give gifts to family and friends for Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, Christmas, the New Year, etc. They certainly showed up on Black Friday throughout the weekend into Cyber Monday, and we obviously see the numbers trending in that direction that show a lot more spending than last year, and maybe that's a trajectory we're just going to continue to see up and to the right.
Well, let me ask
Yeah.
you, because we saw, at least here on the East Coast, lots of reports around Black Friday where people were saying there was no really good deals. There wasn't a lot of traffic in the malls. And is it all shifting to Cyber Monday now, or is that the trajectory we're on?
We have seen, that's a great point,
Yeah.
Mike. We
Yeah.
have seen a lot of oh, sorry, John. A lot of organizations shift doorbuster deals online, so Black Friday doesn't have to be the chaos that it used to be. I think a lot of people were online shopping on Black Friday as well because they can, looking for great deals. There's a lot of tips out there from experts on what to be looking for, what to avoid, how to do safer transactions. Use the HTTPS, for example. That's your friend as well. And so I think that we're seeing a lot of those retailers just want to go where the consumers are. And if the consumers want to transact online, then they have to shift, and they've been doing that Black Friday to the cybersphere.
All right. So professional shoppers are online and the amateurs are in the stores, right?
I guess so.
Well, that's a lot what the people do. I mean, in a sense, if you don't want to wait for the delivery, a lot of the folks were mass buying online, say from a Target, and then they would just pull up, pick up their goods, and then drive off. So their experience at Target lasted all of like 4 or 5 minutes just to pick up what you had ordered. And I think that's actually becoming quite common, especially out here in the last few years in the Valley.
Mitch, do you think the websites that we built are more resilient these days? I have yet to hear about the catastrophic e-commerce crash yet, but it's still early. Or do you think the IT folks, have their arms around this whole issue?
Well, it's a good point. I hadn't thought about that part of it, Mike, but it may be that, this isn't the flash mob sale or the gone viral moment. This is a buildup, right? We've been increasing our usage of online buying, not just events around Black Friday and things like that, but on an everyday basis. It's kind of like the airlines, highest volume day was like on just July 12th or something. You like set some records. So we're just experiencing so much more overall volume. I think that helps us handling the peaks because they aren't so drastically different than the day-to-day operations. Well, one thing that I'm really fascinated about this is, I'm not a chatbot fan, but it really, because they're kind of the low-hanging fruit of generative AI. It's one of the easy things to relatively speaking, to implement with generative AI, and we're seeing agents come on board, and more sophisticated uses of generative AI. But to hear, Lisa and John talking about, John saying sort of closet. Yeah, I actually used a chatbot. It was helpful.
Yeah, it wasn't intentional. It wasn't intentional. It was almost an
No.
accidental event. It was actually fine. But I don't have a high regard for it. And in a sense, I think it is low hanging fruit. But yeah, it was actually okay.
What it made me think of is, don't. I'm saying this to myself. Don't judge. We judge chatbots as being, of limited use because for so long chatbots were, hi, how may I help you? And you type in whatever, it would come back with, well, is it one of these 3 things? That's all I can do for you. And unless you're in those 3 things bucket, you're out of luck. Now it's much different with generative AI. So, maybe even if you don't admit it to your family over the holiday break that you actually used a chatbot, maybe we give it a try, give it a second look.
Mhm. Lisa, is that generational? And I asked this question because my father-in-law, who's up in his 70s, can't stand anything that doesn't involve a human for customer
Right.
service. And my younger son, or one of my younger sons who's in his 20s, if he never spoke to another person in customer service again, he'd be perfectly happy.
Yeah. I think you bring up a great example within your own family of the generational differences that we see.
Mhm.
I think those people that didn't grow up with computers in their pockets are probably have less patience. And that's something I think patience dissipated during the pandemic, and I don't think it's coming back. I think we see a lot of that where people of older generations want to have that human connection to be able to do a transaction more seamlessly. And I think the younger generations have more patience with that or understand they probably can get what they're looking for by not having to go through a human. But of course, we've got how many generations, in the workforce today, what, five? And that keeps growing. So I think we have to, companies, retailers, et cetera, the big box stores and everybody have to go where the consumers are, and they have to be able to have the cyber conversations. They have to be able to have the human conversations as well to meet their customers where they want to be met.
John, you said you accidentally fell into using that agent, and I cannot help but wonder
Yeah.
if the people who designed that website, that didn't happen by accident. They had a plan
No, I know it was
basically.
all intentional. Yeah, it was the fish that they caught. Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, I'm like this is it's all designed to take advantage of people like me. Actually, I had to be honest though. I actually then did call the store, but the reason I actually did want to talk to a person because I wanted to make sure that the part was available, and also I did quite. I'll be honest, I didn't quite trust the chatbot. But what happened was like a lot of people, I ended up talking to somebody, I think the person was in the Philippines, right? They have no association with the store except they're part of a call center. And it was fine, but I kind of used the human element and think. But going back to what you said about your son, I had the same situation with our youngest is 24, and I don't think he goes to stores. I mean, only at the last minute to buy like a knickknack or something because there's a time elements, right? Where he has a couple of hours to
Mhm.
show up at a party. But otherwise, he will not go anywhere close to a physical store or location.
Well, and DoorDash and Uber delivery, right? We don't even go
Yep.
to pick it up.
Nope. You can get
No,
everything
He
delivered.
uses a lot of
I will
I
tell you, my youngest is a huge fan of going to certain stores. He will go to Micro Center here, walk around, create a list, and then go home and order it online.
Micro Center is the
Oh,
mothership.
interesting.
That's my favorite.
I'll admit I did all my shopping online. I don't think I didn't visit one store outside of Whole Foods on Black Friday throughout the weekend because I could do everything that I wanted online. I knew what I was looking for. I could get it. And I generally have decent experiences with chatbots. I was saying earlier how I like to be patient with them. I did have one poor experience, and it wasn't related to the holiday shopping season. I was trying to book an appointment for my car for service, and it's either the vendor or the dealer that forces you to go through a chatbot to book everything. You can't get to a human. There probably was a service number I could have called. And I was able to book the appointment, but I tried 4 times to get a loaner car, and the chatbot handoff to the human was just disconnected. It just wasn't able to happen. That's probably the worst chatbot experience I've had. But I generally, if I know, and I think with most folks know what they're looking for, they're able to do the transaction pretty seamlessly without having to get to a human.
So Lisa, what is the future of the store then? Because outside of the holiday season, when I go to the mall, it's practically empty and
Yeah.
walking around, and it's not a destination that it used to be where people used to just come and hang out. So, do we need to upgrade the mall experience, or is it just passe?
Well, I think the mall experience here in Silicon Valley is outstanding. There's one thing that's been seriously upgraded that I've seen in the Valley over the last maybe 5 years. But something I saw recently, I think I saw this on the Today Show yesterday, was that the rise of the resurgence of brick and mortar bookstores. People want to go into a bookstore to have that sort of legacy experience. So I think that, again, it's like what I was saying before, you got to meet the customers where they are. I think both experiences are equally important. And some folks, just like some folks I still like to have a physical book. I was never a Kindle user. I don't like to read things on my iPad. I like that legacy experience. And I think we're seeing, at least in the bookstore sector, we're seeing more folks want that in-person, old-fashioned experience.
It is true. A lot of folks are buying records now because they want that
Yes.
tactile
Yes.
experience
Oh,
of
the
owning
vinyl
something.
sales. Yes.
That's what my son wants for Christmas was a record player, like a vinyl record
Really?
player. That's a comeback.
That's awesome.
Yes, it's the comeback. It's a comeback of the vinyl record, and
Yeah.
it's tactile, right?
Yeah.
I was going to mention, Lisa. The one thing I think is an absolute factor in the success of almost every mall near where I live, that presence of an Apple store. No matter
Oh,
what's the situation, what it's surrounded by,
yeah.
it is swarming with people.
Always.
And it is used as it's like a Century movie theater. They did the same thing here, where they would plant that in an Apple store, and the other stores would benefit from it.
Yes.
So that was a drawing card.
It's a hub.
Are
for
those
sure.
are those people actually shopping, or are they just lined up at the Genius Bar waiting for service?
I'm among them. So I will go in there because the customers. I sometimes am a little hard on Apple, but their customer service experience is absolutely outstanding, and it's quick. And a lot of people there go there to get something fixed, but then you get upsold in other areas. But anyway, I found that interesting. Versus any other electronic store, it's
Well,
usually kind of hit and miss.
I
Really?
scratch my head though, and I go, if the Apple experience is great, how comes there's so many people lined up at the Genius Bar trying to get something fixed?
This
I
planned
actually forgot. I
obsolescence,
did
isn't
buy
that what they
something on
call it?
Cyber Monday. Speaking of Apple, I had to buy a new Apple Watch, and I was able to do the entire transaction online and pay a courier a few bucks to actually deliver it to my house. Like within 2 hours of the order, there was the watch. So it was. Of course, I didn't get a deal on it. I thought I might get a deal from Apple on Cyber Monday. I did not, but I have a new watch, and it works well.
All right, folks. Well, I'm pretty sure that Santa's still working on his naughty and nice list. It's just like most things, it's going to be online. We'll be back in a minute.
Cloud Native Now is the web's leading resource for the growing cloud native ecosystem. CloudNativeNow.com is your destination for news, thought leadership, features, and webinars on cloud-native architecture, Kubernetes, serverless, cloud-native application development, microservices, service mesh, cloud-native security, and more. Stay on the cutting edge of modern application development at Cloud Native Now.
All right, folks, we're back, and we're going to geek out a little bit because, well, the folks over at Salesforce Heroku have announced that sometime early next year, they're going to bring a platform as a service environment to Kubernetes. And if you've been watching this show, we all went to KubeCon and talked about what was going on in cloud native space for a long time. And one of the issues is it's still too hard to build these applications, and people are struggling with these things. So maybe this PaaS from Heroku will be the answer. There are other PaaSes for the platform, Mitch, but what's your take on what's going on here? It's still too hard for developers to build these applications, but does Heroku make it simple?
Well, Heroku's a little bit nostalgia here. Heroku was really a darling of the early kind of DevOps days, maybe even pre-DevOps days of, I think of it as before it was bought by Salesforce. It was essentially the dark or shadow IT for developers. I remember a developer coming to me, I've built this and here's what I did. I'm like, hey, where'd you do that? I did it in the cloud on Heroku. What's a Heroku? So developers are using it as a complete environment to both develop and then run applications. And Salesforce acquired Heroku in 2011. And in all honesty, it's really languished quite a bit. It has not kept up. It's been an environment where you could build an application and run it, but sort of the rest of the organization isn't ready to run Heroku apps, right? Operations doesn't know what Heroku is and how to work with it. It's not a substantial platform to run businesses on today. At least it's languished in that ability. But what's happened now more recently, and Heroku was part of a recent AppDev field day that we did through their Tech Field Day group within Futurum, and had a chance to talk with them behind the scenes before these announcements were made. So they're making some significant investment to not only catch up Heroku technically, but also to kind of with how we're developing software today. So you see what's happening in the cloud is it used to be, or it has been, get into Amazon's cloud and then we kind of lock in because this is all the stuff there and we just kind of tacitly support other things. Yeah, we support Microsoft, but not really. We support this, but not really. We want you to use our stuff. Now you see, for example, Oracle offering in native support within Microsoft Azure environment. So the not only the cloud providers, but the software tech providers are recognizing they got to run their stuff not just in their cloud, but in other people's cloud, and do it with high fidelity, with the same kind of capability and support that you can get natively from that vendor's offering. Same thing with this. So what they've done with Heroku is they are upgrading the underlying platform, so moving it on to Kubernetes. And if you don't know about Kubernetes, Kubernetes is essentially going to become everywhere. It's the workload kingpin operating system, workload system, if you will, for software running and from the edge to the core of the network and even into the enterprise. So they're modernizing it that way. The other thing that's happened since Heroku's kind of heyday is we have something called remote development environments, and essentially setting up a dev environment so that I can, it could dynamically allocate the resources that I need. There's companies like DevZero where, I don't pre-allocate what I need for resources. It detects that, you need a GPU because you're using the CUDA library. Okay, great. We'll provision that for you and do it all for you and set up your development that way instead of, hand building it or a platform engineering team building it. Kind of the same thing here is Heroku is trying to reposition itself as that kind of current generation or next generation of remote development environment and catch on to that wave again. So I applaud them for working really hard to make the kind of investments that they need to make to not just modernize it, but have Heroku be part of what the current generation of development environments, et cetera, and the technologies that you can use. They just added support for .NET. So I don't mean to ramble on about this. There's so many good things that are happening here. It's a lot of work for Heroku to become a player in this. Again, I'm not underestimating the challenge that they've got.
Right. Well, here's the math that I kind of look at and I find interesting with this is that I think, last estimates I saw, maybe there's 8 million developers that have built an app for Kubernetes, and a lot of them built it once and decided not to do it again. So I have to say that if we can get the base developers who are familiar with Heroku on the Kubernetes, you could easily double that number of developers building cloud native applications, and that would be huge for that community. So they may not be the most sophisticated apps in the world compared to some of the things that, larger enterprises are building, but the overall pool of developers and the number of applications being built, you could see some math in your head that says maybe the number of cloud native applications being rolled out in the next 2 years is twice what it's been for the last 7. I don't know. What do you think, Mitch?
Well, with the proliferation adoption of Kubernetes, it's been said a million times. It's a very complex environment. Kubernetes is simple, said no one. But one of the side effects of that is you see a huge amount of investment in companies, whether it's observability or configuration or operational tools, Gen AI tools to help you understand how to better operate Kubernetes. So it's the developer part of it, but even more so, it's the operations team. How IT ops, how do they manage and run Kubernetes? Platform engineering is also, I think, a key part of that solution. So with the proliferation, Mike, it's kind of like, yes, it's complex, but it's happening anyway. It's being adopted so widespread. I mean, it's showing up at the edge of, data management platforms. Office 365 runs on Kubernetes. You don't know that, but it does. Is that it's forcing then the market needs to simplify it or make it easier to operate. So I think we'll see more and more kind of abstractions or tools to help us better leverage it and also run it.
All right. Well, to that point, and John, I'll ask you this question because when I talked to the folks at Heroku earlier this week, um, I kind of forgot that Salesforce owned Heroku. And
Yeah, that's that. You just stole my point. Thanks, Mike. I was going to say one of the more fascinating things I think about this, and there are several fascinating things about this topic. They bought this company more than a decade ago, and it still existed in some sort of form, and yet they found value and turn it into leverage into something else. And I'm trying to think, how often does that happen? I have friends who sold companies to Salesforce who are long gone after their company was absorbed and evaporated, or they just tossed aside the idea. And it just to me that was interesting. I can't think of anything really comparable to it. That was kind of the one thing I wanted to ask Mitch or you, Mike. Have you ever come across a situation where something that a company acquired, actually they put it to use that long afterwards?
Well, hey, John, I got out my bell-bottom jeans again from the 70s. They're back, so,
Yeah. Yeah.
wide ties
Wow.
and narrow ties or no ties. So, and my point is timing is everything. With the resurgence or with the rise of remote development environments, and that's one of the things that Heroku did really well. It was also an operating environment. That's the platform as a service part of it. And you can argue that, Amazon Developer Queue is part of that, Copilot and so much of what's happening with GitHub and Actions and those kind of environments. So I think the timing, if I was sitting back, and I don't know this is how it happened, but if I'm the, CFO of Heroku and talking to the CFO of Salesforce saying, why should we invest all this money? I'd say, here's what's happening in the market. People are adopting these environments. This what we have. We just have to present a modern day version of that. That's my guess why they've invested so much money in bringing this back.
yeah, I think there's a storyline that's going to emerge, though, that will feel something like this. Salesforce is investing in all these AI agents, and some of those AI agents will be used to build applications. And I can put those things at the front end of Heroku and come up with something that's pretty compelling, I think, if you put those things together. I'm not quite clear that that's what they're absolutely going to do, but it seems like that's the logical flow of the thing and where we should be headed. And if that's the case, then mere mortals can create interesting applications using AI agents on a PaaS that they don't have to know anything about Kubernetes about. So maybe, I don't know, Lisa, I'd like to get your thoughts here. Is Heroku a hidden asset for Salesforce, or is this something they're just going to spit out someday?
That's a great point. I think you all bring out such great points about how long ago the acquisition was, and we're seeing this now in their release. They had nice commentary from customers, from healthcare organizations to cardio-based Car Collect, Kilter Set. So looking at improving the developer experience improves the consumer experience, whether you're consuming a product on an e-commerce website or you're a patient trying to get reliable care from a healthcare provider. I think this is something that if they can demonstrate with Heroku that improving the developer experience is improving the lives of patients, improving the lives of people doing transactions online or whatnot, then it could be an interesting resurgence for this platform as a service technology.
All right. So, Mitch, let me ask you this. So much of what currently exists in the land of Kubernetes is, do-it-yourself platforms, and everybody's talking about moving to platform engineering. And the thing about all those platforms is, somebody had to not just build them, but they have to maintain them and update them. Do you think that there's folks out there who are going to say, you know what? I don't want to do that anymore. Let me just swap this out for a PaaS, even if it's not Heroku. There's a couple other options out there. Have we gotten to the point now where we're kind of sick and tired of custom everything?
Well, I was talking with one of the vendors that has an offering running on Kubernetes, and this is during KubeCon a couple months ago, and they described it as, we lived in the days for a while there of the buyers would say, let me do it myself. I want access to all the bells and whistles and knobs and buttons, so I can kind of don't limit me, right? Don't stifle my creativity, right? And you find out what that really entails now that you have that responsibility. With great power comes great responsibility. The market's now shifted to, I don't have time to mess around with that. My resources cannot be spent trying to figure out how to manage Kubernetes or how to manage a development environment or integrate these, integrate these things all by myself. Let me find people who will take that burden off my shoulders. And that's what's happening in Kubernetes. And that's part of the operationalizing Kubernetes in a way that ops can adopt it, more developers can use it, extracting away some of the complexity but letting me have access to the capabilities if I need it under the hood, if you will. So the market has shifted from I'm going to build this myself to I still want lots of control to the just take care of it for me. And if I need to do something, give me some abilities to step under the hood, at least to some degree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, there's a lot of irony in this conversation for me because early on, it was a handful of developers who were like saying, we're going to use Kubernetes whether IT likes it or not. And then IT eventually discovered that Kubernetes does all kinds of interesting things on the ops side. So now, oddly enough, IT ops teams are telling developers, we're using Kubernetes whether you like it or not.
Yeah. Good. Karma. It's karma.
It is karma. It definitely comes full around. All right. Well, folks, we invite you or suggest you should go experiment with all this stuff because, decisions you might have made 4 or 5 years ago, you don't have to lock yourself into that forever. Things change and things do move on. Hey, I want to thank our guest today. We have Mitch Ashley, who is Vice President and Practice Lead for Application Development and DevOps over at the Futurum Group. Mitch, thanks for being on the show.
Absolutely. Pleasure being here with the team.
All right. And of course, we have Lisa Martin, the CMO Advisor, who's out there aligned with our folks at Futurum Group, but also works with all kinds of different vendors out there and has all those great insights around what's happening in the holidays. And I'm sure we'll be talking about that again soon. Lisa, thanks for being here.
My pleasure. It was really fun. Thank you.
And the, I guess, somewhat Techstrong anointed czar of Silicon Valley, John Schultz.
God. Is Al whispering in your ear right now, Mike? No. It was fun to be here. It was also good to see you all at AWS reInvent as short as the time I was there. That was fun.
Good. All right. Good to break
Always
some bread with you, John.
Yeah, well, I was going to, exactly. My exact
Always
sentiments.
good to see everybody in person. In fact, hey, if you see any of us at a show, stop by and say hi. We'd love to get in touch with all of you. Hey, everybody, thanks for watching this show. Stay tuned. There's some awesome content on Techstrong TV coming up right behind this. We'll see you next time.